The count template is a master list of items that you'll use to count your inventory. The count template is found under the menu option, under the setup folder, and then by selecting count templates, you can access your count template. Once you access your count template, I recommend you navigate to the View tab and deselect the To Do and the menu to give yourself more screen to work with. You'll notice once you're logged into your count template that you have two separate areas. The first area is the My Items, and these are all of the items that are available to you to count in your inventory. The second section is the My Inventory Templates, and this is where you'll actually create your count template. First, I'll give you a brief overview of the My Items. We essentially have two different types of items. We have standard items, which are all of the items that you would purchase from a vendor, and then we have recipe items, which are items that you would prepare from standard items. An example of a standard item would be any of your paper or cleaning or merchandise product. Additionally, it's going to be any of your raw food products. Think your bag-in-the-box Pepsi or your chicken or your cubes of chili or blocks of cheese. When you think of recipe items, those recipe items are going to be things like cooked spaghetti, because you've had to add sauce and salt and oil to create that particular product. Shredded extreme cheese, because you're mixing two standard items, your extreme regular cheese and your cheddar regular cheese, to create the extreme shredded cheese. So there's only 13 total recipe items that are available to be inventoried. You'll also notice that for each item, an account is associated with that particular item. So for example, you have accounts such as core and dessert as far as the recipe goes. If I clear the filter, which I know I have a filter on because there's this pink area down here, and I can just hit this X here, which will clear the filter, it will show me all of the different accounts that are available, from beverage to cleaning to core to dessert to food. Some of the items that would be in core, for example, would be chili, cheese, spaghetti, hot dogs, buns. Some of those items that are in your basic food would be things like your bean mix, your burrito mix, your garlic bread. All of those items that are tied to a recipe that you sell that don't live under one of these other food or dessert or produce areas. The other item I'll point out is what's called the non-recipe items. Now, these are items that are not currently tied to recipes that you don't bring into your POS system. So for example, hot sauce, salt packets, pepper, ketchup bottles, all items that we need to inventory, but that are not necessarily tied to the POS system. So to clear out any filters that you turn on here, you can simply click the X. And you'll notice that this has a total record of X amount of items. So for instance, for this particular restaurant, there's 662 items that are available to them. Under the item name, you can find which items you are looking for. And you'll notice that there is a count measure that is associated with each of these item names. So for example, you'll notice that hot sauce bulk is in here twice. And the reason for that is because it shows you the different units of measure in which this particular item can be counted by. So for example, you can count your bulk hot sauce by a case, or you can count your bulk hot sauce by a gallon, or you can choose to count by both. And then it will show the date in which these particular items were created. If these items are currently in your count template, there would be a check mark here. We have not created any count templates yet. I'll show you how to do that during today's session. But if once we do begin to do that, you'll notice there's a check mark once items are added to your count template. And you'll also notice that these items are counted either daily or just once per week. Okay. And as costs begin to fill in from the invoices that you receive from Reinhardt and B&J, the updated costs will show up in here and when you last purchased and by what unit of measure. So this is just your list of master items. In order to create your count templates, what you're going to do is you're going to navigate down to the My Inventory templates and begin to create a list of items or locations in which you count. So for example, typically everybody has a specific location that they begin their inventory counts on. So for instance, we have a walk-in that everybody would perform inventory in. By simply typing in walk-in here, I've created a walk-in location. I can then go and create my next location where I count items, which for most people, they move from the walk-in to the dry storage. And you get to create your count template in the order in which you count your restaurant. So I've got my dry storage after that. After my dry storage, I may have my soda rack that allows me to count my Pepsi products, so on and so forth. So you would create each location that you would be counting items in. Once you've created all of your locations throughout your restaurant, from walk-in to dry storage to soda rack to, we'll say it's back of house, to then you have maybe your steam table area. And then maybe after that, you're going to create each one of your server stations. So on and so forth. At that point, maybe my last location that I'm creating is my merchandise cabinet. Once I've created all of my locations, I can then navigate up to my task tab and save. By saving this, I've locked these locations into place. I do have the ability, as I'm working in my count template and creating it, to change the names and say, I do not want to call it that. I want to call it my merchandise cabinet, if you want to call it something different. And if maybe you did like what you called it, before you save your changes, you can hit cancel and it will set everything back to the way it was. Or let's just say that you don't want this location at all. You can simply navigate and delete that particular location. Again, by saving, that would save those changes. By hitting cancel, it will keep all of those changes in place. Any questions at this point, guys?
Jay, is this where, like in your walk-in, if you want to do shelf 1, shelf 2, is this where you do that also, or is that later on?
Yep, and I'm going to show you that here just as we come up. Yep, so that's a great question. Okay. So first my recommendation is to go in and create all of your locations. So think about where do you start? I'm going to go ahead and pause the record. So once you have created your actual locations, you are then going to go into the details and begin to add your items and the shelves in which those items live on. Now, the best way to do this is to go to display options and look at only my location template. This is going to give you more screen to work with here, okay? So for example, if I walk into my walk-in and I walk into the walk-in and I look immediately to the left, and the first item on my top shelf would be, for example, tomato paste. I'm going to begin to type tomato paste. I will select that item. And then I'm going to look and determine how I want to count that particular item. Right here, I have two options. I have a case and I have a bag. Now, if you would ever have a full case in that particular location, you would probably want to put both case and bag into there. If that's a particular location that you would only have bag, then you would probably only just want to put bags to make your counts simpler. The more detailed you can be on setting up your count templates, the better off you and whoever else is going to be counting your inventory in the future will be in the accuracy of those physical counts. So for the sake of the training, we'll imagine that we have sometimes a full case and bags in this location. Additionally, you're going to create a summary measure. Now what the summary measure does is it adds the whole measure plus the partial measure plus the each measure together to create, and then sums it into either how many cases you have or how many bags you have. And how you're going to choose the summary measure when you think about it is going to be about how do you want to, when you're reviewing your physical counts, the total of that line, how do you want to review it by? Do you want to know how many bags you have, or do you want to know how many cases you have? And that's how you'll choose the summary measure. Once you have selected the summary measure, that is the conversion of the combination of these three, you will then add the shelf that this particular item will be on. Again, this works in either an alphabetic or numeric order. I recommend typing in, for instance, if it's the first shelving unit that you count on the top shelf, that you would just simply type shelf 1.1. The shelf representing the shelf, the 1 representing the first shelving unit, the 0.1 representing the top shelf. When you're ready to add an additional item, you can then just you can then select below that particular item and select your next item. So my next item here would be tuna. And for the tuna, I'm going to count that particular item by just the tub, and my summary measure, I'd like it to convert my tub into how many cases I have. And that again is going to be on the first shelf, 1.1. Then I'm going to select my next item, which is going to be my garlic toast or my Texas toast that I order from Reinhart. And here I'm going to count this by the loaf, because when I receive, and the reason I'm only counting by the loaf is, imagine I receive my Texas toast, I keep it in my freezer, and I only put loaves in my walk-in to thaw. So then I'm going to want to create how many loaves I have. And again, once I've created a shelving unit, I can then use this drop down to select the same shelf. And then my final item on that particular shelf is my cream cheese. So I'm going to select my cream cheese and my counting measure for my cream cheese, what I want it to convert that to, and then my shelving unit. Now I'm ready to move to, I'm still in the first shelving unit, but I'm going to move down to my second shelf. So my first item I have on there is going to be my cheese. Now this particular cheese is going to be my actual cheese in my tubs. So my tubs when I've already shredded it. So here I'm just going to simply select the pound option. And then I want to know how many pounds of cheese I have here. So I'm going to convert that, and I'm actually going to put this on shelf 1.2. It's still the first shelving unit, yet the second shelf. And what you'll notice is now it is separating out these items that live on this shelf and these items that live on this particular shelf. My next item on there would be my cooked chili. Now my cooked chili is a recipe item, so my only options for that are by pound or ounce. And due to the type of scales you'll be using, you'll want to select just pound. And then I can come down here and select my shelving unit. Now I'm ready to move down to my third shelf, and put my spaghetti there, my cooked spaghetti. I'm going to put, for instance, here that this is a tub of cooked spaghetti. And then I'm going to create a new shelf. And now I've created those items that live on this first shelf. And then finally, I may have, maybe I forgot to add an item to this shelf here. I can come down here right below the spaghetti. I can select that particular item. And then I can add that item to whichever shelf I forgot to add it to. So let's say it meant to go on shelf 1.2. I could either select that shelf, which will then put it on there, or I could put it on an entirely different shelf if I choose to. Once I've added these items to this particular location, or this shelving unit, I'm going to want to save my work, so then I can hit save. By pushing this push pin right here, I can pin this to the wall and just look at those items that are on this particular shelving unit, and then hitting the X will take me back to where I was. Once I'm ready to move on to my next shelving unit, right below the hot dogs, I'm going to go ahead and select my extreme cheese, for instance, my extreme cheese for this one. This is my shredded extreme cheese. And this one, this is my tubs, or sorry, not my pans, my tubs. And I want that to convert to tubs. So here I'm going to create a brand new shelving unit. So shelf 2, and put it on 2.1. So as I flow around my restaurant, the way this looks is as I walk into the walk-in, I start on the left-hand side on the top shelf. In the first shelving unit, I count my tomato paste, then my tuna, then my Texas toast, then my cream cheese. Then I move below those items to my cheddar cheese, to my cooked chili, below those items to my tubs of spaghetti, below those items to my hot dogs, and then I move on to my second shelving unit. And on the top shelf, I would have my extreme cheese. As you continue to set up your locations and the items within those locations, there may be times that you have the exact same items in multiple locations. So for example, in your server location, you may have your carry-out crackers that you're going to count by the box, and we'll just call this shelving unit 1.1, as well as you're going to have ketchup bottles that you may choose to count by the each. And you may also have in that particular location, we'll say forks, or I'm sorry, we'll say carry-out cups that you may choose to count to see how many sleeves that you have, as well as we'll say you keep cases of forks underneath that section as well. And it is okay to mix your paper and food products all in the same place, so that way as you're moving through, you're just counting what is in front of you. Once you have saved that work and you've set those up, you put that on the shelf. You can then, if this server station 1 is set up the exact same way as server station 2, you can hold the control button down, select all the items, navigate to actions, shelf and count order, and replicate. By replicating, it's going to ask you which locations do you want to replicate these items in, and then you can select all locations that you would choose to do this in. So I want to replicate this in server station number 2. I hit OK. I do not want to delete the ones in my current location, but if I wanted to replicate them, move them to a location, and delete them from an existing location, I could select that. And I do want to copy the shelves. And then I can hit OK. And then you'll notice that those items are all now down here in server station 2. Once I'm done with my work, I can then save my changes. And by setting up one server station, I'm able to set up all of my server stations exactly the same. Okay, once you've created all of your count locations, you can go in and you can modify these locations as often as you'd like, meaning you can delete items, or you can also move items around. In order to move one item from one area to another, you can right-click, and let's say you want the cream cheese to come in between the tomato paste and the tuna. By right-clicking on cream cheese, you can then either move up, move to top, move to bottom, or you can move to a specific count order. Now the count order is associated with the column that says count order. So if I want my cream cheese to be in between my tomato paste and my tuna, I would simply select I want to put that in count order position number 2. And now cream cheese is moved in between those two items, and I can save my changes. You also can move them from shelf to shelf simply by changing the shelf in which that item is located on, and then put the position into the, say if I want to put it at the top, I can put it at the top of that position and then save my changes. During your initial setup of the count template, you can move items around and delete them and add them as often as you'd like. Once you have created your locations, you can also delete the location names as often as you like. Keep in mind, if you delete a location name, it will delete all of the items inside of that location. I recommend, instead of deleting, that you just simply hide. And by hiding an item, and I save it, it will make that item, if I go to view and turn off my hidden rows, I can no longer see that particular location. By selecting on the hidden rows, it brings my hidden rows back, and I'm able to uncheck the hide, make save to my changes, and that location is back even when I turn off the hidden rows. Once you have performed your first inventory count of these items and you've entered into the actual count sheets, you are no longer able to delete a location. You are only able to hide that at that point moving forward. So it is important to note that you want to make sure that you get your count template set up exactly the way you want it prior to performing your first inventory count. Because while you can make changes, you can no longer delete locations. You can only modify or hide them. Okay, so as you guys work through setting up your count template, please keep in mind that you're going to want to set it up in the most efficient manner for how you would perform counts. So a final note that I'll talk about is as you're adding items, you are going to want to add items as they exist. So for instance, if you have, and I'm going to go ahead and delete the chicken out of here, if you have an item such as carryout crackers in your dry storage, and those carryout crackers are sitting next, we'll say that they're on shelf 1.1. And those carryout crackers, as you look at them, are actually sitting next to your 1 Coney boxes. You would want to set your count template up just like that. So that way, as you go to each item to count them, you're looking at them as you're looking at them in the restaurant. By putting food and paper next to each other, if that's how it lives in your restaurant, that's going to save you time as you're actually performing the inventory. Items that you're going to want to make sure that you add are all items that you currently perform inventory from a food standpoint, paper, cleaning, merchandise, and any office supplies that you may inventory today. This concludes the My Count Template training session.